Hi,
Yeah.
it's Alexander Lawrence of Portable Infinite, and today we're here with Allie Smith, and she has a book, The Ballad of Speedball Baby,
Yeah,
and
boy.
make sure everyone buy a bunch of copies for your mom and everybody. And this is a real good book. Yeah, because as we were talking to Allie just a few minutes ago, um, the '90s in New York was a different place. I mean, for me, like punk. I mean, I was born in '64, so like the punk. I bought the Sex Pistols, the Dead Boys, the Ramones records when they came out when I was like 13, but I didn't really go to any shows till like '79 or '80. So looking back, punk had already happened in a way, and like there was like a second wave or a third wave of punk, and then the '80s, like punk kind of went hardcore, and
Mm.
I didn't really do the hardcore thing, although I'd seen Black Flag in a lot of the original bands, and then when I look at some bands like your band and Firewater and John Spencer Blues Explosion, it was kind of like the equivalent of LA. Some of these bands like Gun Club were kind of,
Oh, yeah.
it was like they were kind of, it was like more literary. It was like blues
Mm.
was kind of involved. It went in a direction. It was kind of going in the direction I was going in. I didn't ever have a skinhead. I wasn't really into fashion or anything. It was like to me like I guess looking back, I was more like an art punk or something. So which was looked down upon and stuff. But
Oh.
getting back to the book. So yeah, Speedball Baby, you were often described as avant-garde blues. And I mean this book, my first when I read it, I think it reads more like a novel to me than
Mm.
because I mean because since I worked in the literary field and reviewed books and interviewed authors. I mean, I interviewed Elizabeth Wurtzel, and she did
Mm.
a big memoir in '95, and she did it when she was like 30 years old and stuff. But I wasn't really a fan of the book, but I met her and she kind of won me over, like just the force of her person. I mean, the three books that she did, I didn't really care for them, but I read them. But Elizabeth Wurtzel herself was a really interesting person. But
Well, yeah.
but your book, I mean, it just seems more novelistic. Like you could just read it like, oh, these are characters. It jumps in time like a novel. It goes back and forth. It's not just like, oh yeah, here I was born and I was eating some eggs with my mom or something. It goes back. It's very interesting how you kind of bring in the reader, and it's not really I mean uh like a lot of memoirs. I mean, usually they're the ones that I think of. There's like drug addiction or some kind of victimhood kind of thing going on.
Trauma porn. Trauma porn. Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, how did you well, I guess the question would be like when did you start writing this book, and like how long did it take, and did you wrote it out in pen and paper, or how'd you do it?
Well, hi. It is so nice to talk to you. I love that you're immediately talking about the writing and the structure. That's awesome. Um, I really appreciate that. I mean, it took me ages because this is my first venture into this kind of writing, this sort of long form narrative. I really appreciate that you talked about the sort of slightly maybe avant-garde structure of it. Somebody described it as falling through memory holes, which I really appreciated because, as she said, that's how memory works. It's like a sound or a song or a smell or something, just and you're in it, and I hadn't really thought of it that way. The trajectory is like, it's three parts. First part is getting across from New York to LA. And since you're from LA and you moved to New York, you know that those two things are those two places are extremely different in every possible cultural sense. And except that there are, wild people doing wild things in both places, but the flavor is always different. So, you know, getting to the benefactors at MCA who had signed us to our major label deal, and like that adventure and misadventure and madness and ultimate destruction and implosion. But I wanted to be doing, I did want it to be more novelistic. I mean, I'm not, as a couple of editors at some of the major publishing houses reminded me, a household name. So I'm not that. So since it's not a celebrity memoir, which can often be like, first I did this and then I did this, and like people are in there because it's, whoever it is. Um, I knew I was going to have to tell a story, which was a very personal story, and that was going to be its strength. And I might as well go with my strengths. You know what I mean? Be vulnerable, be real, and try and tell a good story.
Yeah, you're like a modern day Proust, like you go to CBGB's and that triggers a memory, and then we go into that scene, and I mean it's like
May I quote you? May I quote you? That's it. I'm writing that down. Modern
okay,
day Proust. We've
yeah,
done it here. We've done it.
you're a punk
Punk
Proust.
Proust. Punk Proust. I'm writing that down. Punk Proust. I love that. Okay.
and
Okay, carry on. Yes,
and
sorry.
also like I mean there were I mean in cultural I mean there was Please Kill Me. I mean that came out when I moved back to New York the second time, and so I got to relive because like in New York at that time Joey Ramone lived in Astor Place, so you'd see him.
Oh yeah, yeah. On
He
Ninth
was
Street, wasn't it? Ninth
he
Street.
was so tall, so you'd see him coming from a mile away. And I remember going to gigs, and remember going to Coney Island High and seeing Rico Kasich, and you would see
Mhm.
people on the street like I saw members of Blondie, and I saw a lot of people at there was a Please Kill Me party at the Gershwin Hotel and
Mm.
Coney Island High, and their Luna Chicks were happening, and yeah, like a lot of the band, the Ton Ups, I discovered because I met Sam in the '90s, and him and his wife Cindy, they worked at Beacon's Closet in Williamsburg.
Yeah, I remember that. And Sam played in the Ton Ups, and the Ton Ups was my fronted by my ex-boyfriend Carmine. So we had a lot of crossover there, and I got to meet him. That was nice. Really
Yeah,
sweet.
I think
Awesome.
I bought the single because I knew Sam and stuff, and because I wasn't really following music. I was more like listening to techno music most of the '90s and stuff.
Yeah.
But a band with I'd already knew John Spencer Blues Explosion. You played with those guys a lot, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, you know how people love to clump things together so things make more sense in their minds. So the big thing was like, oh, these two bands are alike. Well, we were very different and came from very different points of view. One was more, rockabilly, avant-garde, punk inspired, and then they were more blues and punk inspired. So it sort of met in a nice place. But then we toured with them quite a lot, and it was very interesting to watch John and Ron, our singer Ron, because they are both super charismatic front people, but they're not the same animal. You know what I mean? Like John is very, great looking, charismatic, has the swagger of a certain type, and then Ron is angles, poetry, um, menace, a different type of charisma. So every night on tour, it would be like the two of them going. We would all sort of be like leaving it all on the stage to defeat the other.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Good natured.
Yeah, I forgot. Kid Congo Powers was also living in New York at that time, so you'd see him around. I mean,
Oh, he's been on a few of our albums, and he's a good pal. He wrote a lovely blurb for the book, for my book.
and
Um, yeah.
yeah, there was bands. I mean, there was bands that were more kind of Nick Cave or Tom Waits influence, and like bands like Firewater and yourself, and I guess just like like there was like I mean hardcore '80s, and then the '90s. It was like a couple of punk bands got or like Green Day got really popular, so the record labels were trying to sign bands, and then
Mm.
that didn't really work unless unless you were maybe No Doubt or something, and then there was a couple years where electronica was they were trying to push that like the Prodigy and stuff, and then that didn't really work after those bands kind of came and went, and then we get to the Strokes and stuff, so there was like a big time in the '90s where there was like a bunch of bands that in New York. I mean everything's very incestuous and or something,
Mm.
or it's
Well, it's a very small scene. I mean,
yeah,
unless you're talking about like rap or hip hop, the birth of those things. Like if you're talking about punk or, that sort of alternative music, it really was only happening on the Lower East Side of New
yeah.
York. I mean, in the 70s, it went up further up into Union Square, woo, way uptown. But in Danceteria, but at our time, it's a pretty small cube of blocks that we're talking about, and people cross pollinate. Like my, the studio that we recorded almost everything in, New York Head Studios, it was built into the apartment on the Lower East Side that our guitarist Matt Verderay created and built, with his hands. And it was a really rough area. A million people came through there and recorded. Mick Collins, Eugene Hutz from Go Go Bordello, all the guys in the Blues Explosion. I would photograph them for promo shots in that apartment. So much stuff happened 24/7 in that apartment, in that scene. Everybody in those bands that you mentioned, Kala, all those bands, Jonathan Fire Eater, were coming through. We were all playing on each other's albums. We were all experimenting together, having side projects. Matt ended up in Heavy Trash with John Spencer.
Oh,
So
right,
it's,
right.
it's all sort of like, it was of the moment, very much. Like I think a band like Speedball Baby, and it was, oop, okay, that light went out. All right, what's that? Oh, okay, sorry. Couldn't have happened anywhere else.
Did
Do you know
you
what I mean?
did you play the Pyramid Club on Avenue A?
Oh yeah. Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna try and turn this light back on. You can just edit that out, right? I don't know
Okay,
what just happened.
yeah.
I don't know what just happened
We're
there.
having technical problems. Yeah, I mean,
We're
yeah.
having technical problems. Of course we are. It's a punk band. We're having technical problems. Why is that not working? Huh. Okay, we'll see what happens, shall we? Um, yeah. The Pyramid Club. I mean, I went through a lot of incarnate because I'm born and raised in New York. I was born in Manhattan, moved out young, lived on the Lower East Side of Clinton and Delancey in the late 80s. It was real rough. Um, and the Pyramid Club was there throughout those things. It was like a drag scene, and I played in punk bands there, and I saw punk bands there. So through the years. But by the 90s, it was more about CBs and Coney Island High and
Well, there were brownies.
brownies.
Yeah, brownies was
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Yeah, Eugene Hutz told me he lived by Thompson Square Park, like he grew up there. Like he told me he grew up in the East Village.
Why is that light doing that? So sorry. What is going on?
It's
Of
haunted.
course it's going to be that. Oh God. Um, Eugene Hutz is not from New York,
No,
but
no,
he was there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, during the 90s. Yeah, maybe that's what. Yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. He was a big presence at the, I mean, he's a big personality and he's a great guy. Um, he was a big presence at the studio, at Matt's studio.
yeah. I mean, what's different then than
Keep
now?
talking. I can hear you.
Uh,
Keep
is
talking.
is the difference is like people used to hang out more. I mean, there used to be more cafe. It just seems like bands. I mean, there was intermixing. People used to hang out. You know, I mean, I used to hang out at the Pink Pony. I used to sit there at the Pink Pony, and Jay Mascis or Billy Corgan used to walk in, and I didn't know who Jay Mascis was for a long time, and then he ended up marrying a friend of mine who was this German girl and stuff, and so like they used to be. I mean,
Well, I mean, that's what New York is, right? Like New York is just, it would be the uncoolest thing in the world to be walking around New York being like, oh my God, like New York is just New York. You just exist and you cohabitate, and there's Joe Strummer at the bar, blah, 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 blah. But I don't know what it is now because
yeah,
it's changed. I've changed. We've changed all the stuff, and I'm sure it exists somewhere. I don't know in what form, probably in the outer boroughs, but it was quite a time and place
yeah.
to be there
I used to have a post office box over in Soho, over on Spring Street
then.
Station, and Patti Smith used to live over there because I used to run into her all the and. Yeah, I never thought at that time. I never thought, oh, let's get a selfie or something. That would have been kind of
Yeah,
because she was always with her kid or something, and I was going, oh,
yeah.
Patti Smith.
But that's the thing about, I mean, I can't speak for too many other places because I've only ever lived in New York until now when I moved to England. But that's the thing about New York. It's just like, in some sense, it's like, are you here to do the work? Like that's what it is, being an artist in New York. It's just sort of just do the work, kick its ass. It's not really about like, oh, do you know who I am? Blah 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 blah. And in that sense, I would imagine it's a little different in LA.
Yeah, yeah. If you, I mean, the only guy I ever took a picture with was that guy, the Kramer from Seinfeld, and it was just because my friend was visiting from LA or from San
Of
Francisco at
course.
the time, and that was the only
But
reason why we took the picture. And
but
but
do you know what?
What's
Ron
that?
was the stand-in for
Oh,
Kramer on
oh, really?
Seinfeld.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Okay. So,
because he kind of looked like him and he could do, because he kind of acted like, moved like him. So his audition was showing up, and Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld were in the room, and Ron fell in through the door and just sort of like righted himself like a Kramer move, and they just started busting out laughing, and he got the gig.
oh, yeah. I was gonna say, okay. Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, coming from California, I mean, New York to me seems more like a European city than the rest of America, North America. Like, do you agree with that, or because it's so
I
it's
mean, it seems like a different country than the rest of America right now.
well, no, I was talking about it in the 90s and the 2000s. I mean, like for like the whole time, it seems like because like it's so cosmopolitan, people are from all over. It's just not a bunch of white people or something, like or something. It seems very cosmopolitan. I mean, we in LA, it's half Latino and whatever, but I mean, it's a little bit different, but New York just seems like everybody shows up from all over, and it's very,
Oh yeah. I mean, it's diversity is the fabric of New York, and that's one of the most beautiful things about it. That's just like you're not going to get away with not engaging with everybody, you know, and you're a better person for it, I think. So like when we were living on the Lower East Side in the 90s, late 80s through the 90s, it's a choice that we made for many reasons, and we were better for it. But it was not easy. Those were neighborhoods that the police sort of let deal with themselves, and probably because they didn't prioritize the people that were living in them. But within that becomes like an ethos of neighborhood. So you've got your drug dealer helping the old lady across the street and meaning it, and you've got this. It's just like you're going to behave well with the world if you're going to live in New York. And then you go, I mean, in the 90s when you went out into the country to go cross country on tours, it was something. Like it was, first of all, you had the mythology of the West or the South. You have, I think the mythology that I carried with me and many of us in those days was a lot less complicated. You know what I mean? Like the South, like there's all this sort of wonderful triggers about music and accents and culture. The older you get, the more you're like thinking about what does it mean? How inclusive is it? Blah blah blah. At the time, it was you're going out into the world. I was going out into the world for the first time. It was really exciting. But as my friend Clay from the Subsonics, which is an amazing Atlanta band, reminded me the other day, we were touring there and playing with them, and we went into a Denny's, and they ushered us into past a rope into the section of the restaurant because of the way we looked, that it was us and one couple of color eating in this sectioned off part of the restaurant. And that's a champagne problem for us. It's not for them. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, it's a little bit different. I mean, I tour managed a few bands like in the last 10 or 15 years, and I mean, I think it's through the internet, it's becoming more and more like each other. Like, I guess like going to LA in the 90s was probably, I mean, because I mean, New York people used to read books, people read a lot, smart people, people work for the, some magazine or the UN or something, or you come across these people all the time. When you get to LA, it's just a bunch of, people with no social skills, probably, and you just get, what's this guy's problem? It's like, oh, he doesn't read. He's just full of himself. So it's probably like the 90s probably is the worst, time. You had guys. I mean, I guess Perry Farrell's kind of okay, but the rest of them, I'm not sure about. But getting back to, okay, so we talked about New York's very cosmopolitan place, but when I went to London the first time, maybe around the same time you did in the 90s, I was expecting to see, people, a bunch of guys in London. I only really, well, I did go to Brighton and this other place. I'll get to it, but when the first time I went to London, I was expecting everyone to be like the members of the Clash or something, you know. But then when I got there, I mean, it's like it was cosmopolitan. I was coming from New York too, and I got married to like a British girl too. Like so, I was like there was around 98 2000. It was like oh
Mhm.
maybe I was gonna move to London or something at some point, you know. And it was just okay then,
Mm.
and it seemed easier for her to come to America than me to go over to England and get a passport or whatever was get citizenship.
Visa or something.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I'm married to a Brit. I'm married to a Brit.
and
Um,
is that is it easy for you to stay there? Like,
well, I mean, kind of. I think things are more complicated these days.
well,
Strangely,
it,
when
it,
it's a more, yeah,
it
sorry.
seemed real hard, I think, back then from 2000. It just seemed like a big leap, you know. I mean, I went over there a couple times, like thinking, like, oh, can I do the same stuff? And then we ended up breaking up, and then I came back to LA, is what happened. And then it just, you know, me and a friend started an art gallery in downtown LA and stuff, and it was
You
just,
should write a song about that or do a painting about
yeah.
that.
But my question was like London seemed. I mean, I was the first time I was there. I was hanging out with all these French people. So, and then I never heard anybody's even speaking English at all, except for a couple people in Hackney, maybe. And then the third or fourth time I went there, I went down to um, where's that castle south part, and then it was like one of those towns that was like outside of London. It was more white, and everyone you go up to a cafe and everyone says hi, all you know. Oh, because like
Uh,
London, everyone's real super friendly, and then you get to what's that place called? Where the boiler room is. I was just looking at it.
uh,
Oh, Guildford or something.
I don't know.
You
I
kind of
mean, you're talking about,
you live
yeah.
in the north there, so it's like is everyone kind of
I
high people up there too?
Haya is the thing. Yeah, Haya. But Norwich is where I live, and Norwich is a really cosmopolitan city.
Oh,
Norwich, I mean, I don't know if they would say that because they keep on telling me it's not, but I can see that it is. Is like a lot of artists, a lot of literary people, a lot of social workers, which I really value these days. Like there's a lot of crossovers, a lot of musicians. Everybody I know, like Eugene just came through here with Gogo Bordello. Like I keep seeing people that I know come through here, and you know, there's big music scene. So, I mean, maybe what you're talking about is the difference. Like London and New York are places that everybody comes to fulfill a sort of certain kind of dream. You know, they certainly did in the 90s, usually around music and art. You know, LA is probably more where you go to be a star, and that's a certain kind of vibe. If you go to Gillette, Wyoming, you're going to meet coal miners, you know, in the 90s. You know, everybody's got their industry. So, New
right.
York was like a literary town, a gritty town, you know?
Yeah, it was because I was interested in publishing. It was like at some point I was gonna you know, give it a go, you know, and like and then I guess if you're in music, I mean, you used to go to New York and then LA, there's some of the music industry was in LA. Now there's no music industry anywhere, or it's all over. So it's a
Yeah,
little
I don't know what I don't pretend to know what it looks like now. But you know, Exene Cervenka, who's now a friend of 20 years and also like a also when I was discovering my love of music was one of the people who's just like, yes, please, you know, give me some of what she's having or whatever. You know, like she was for a lot of us, you know, young women particularly, just you know, just incredible. And she wrote the foreword for this book and she read it on the audio book, which was really lovely, like a really good full circle moment for me. Really cool.
yeah, I mean, yeah, like yeah, when I started going to gigs, I mean, since I lived in LA, I mean, the Cramps had just moved here. So I saw a lot of the earliest shows in 80, 81 that I went to were either like Black Flag, the Cramps, or X and stuff. And
Yeah, those are
so,
great bands.
so that, I mean, yeah, I didn't know. I just go, okay, well, this is like our thing. And then occasionally like an English band would show up or a New York band would show up. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
I
familiar.
mean that that like, you know, Gun Club, X, the Germs. I mean, there was a lot of good stuff going on there. I would never say it wasn't, you know. And Kid Congo, who's just a fucking great guy and fantastic inspirational musician, has touched on so many incredible bands, you know, and that was a real like um that was a real gem to get to play with him, you know, and to record with him and everything. And one of our record release parties, it's in the basement at CBGB's, was uh just this great event. I have a, you know, recording of it, but all those bands came up and played our songs with us, and then you know, people from the Blues Explosion, Pussy Galore, I mean Boss Hogg, you know, Railroad Jerk, all these people came up, and then Kid came up and did our song, but then we did some Gun Club song, I can't remember right now, but those just really nice moments, you know, where you're sort of like steeped in the music and steeped in the history of music and sort of in meta, as they would say right now, you know, real time.
Yeah, the LA scene. I mean, a lot of those bands. I mean, the only band that made the original LA punk scene, the Go Go's were maybe the only band that ever went mainstream. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
it was like a scene, and it was like popular in LA, but nowhere else. Like the Germs never really toured. You know, punk touring was started
I
by
mean,
the Dead Kennedys and Black Flag. You know, they kind of invented going around to different cities and trying to, you know, be like Johnny Appleseed of punk and spread it around. And those
yeah,
bands,
I mean, that's what you have to do, though. That's what you really have to do. You know, I mean, like, we probably made more money off of selling merch on tour than we ever made on tour, you know, except for the little bits, these little perks. Like when you get signed, you get a little bit of money and you're like, oh, I guess this is it now. And it's not, you know. But I toured the world with a, you know, a semi-nihilist. The thing that kept Ron from being just completely destructive is that he's so intelligent and funny. And I really do think a sense of humor can help you through this world quite a lot. Like, and literally, like, well read and informed. So he had a sort of bigger sense of himself and the world. But still, it's a lot to take a nihilist across the country and across the world, you know, like it doesn't always work out. So if, you know, Darby Crash couldn't make it that much across the world, you know, it's sort of built in to the process of being in a punk band. It's like either everything's gonna, there were plenty nights that everything fell to shit or exploded or we got chased out of a club or there was this or that, you know. And then other ones that were like triumphantly transcendent because they were happening. See, you got my light. Why did
yeah, the
my
light,
light go off and your light went on? What
oh,
the
that
hell?
was like a piece of paper that fell down. But
Oh,
anyway, so yeah, a lot of punk bands are touring now. Like a lot of the bands you mentioned in the interviews are like Blondie, Stiff Little Fingers, X,
yeah.
and several other. They sign lousy record deals, and then they tour now, and they make all their money now, like and to play big audiences now, that because they didn't make that much money back in the 80s and stuff, and there wasn't
Yeah.
people weren't really pushing the merch back then, I don't think. But is Speedball Baby going to get back together, or are you going to release a CD or something, or so people can hear?
Um, well, there's plenty of CDs out there. There's plenty of recordings out there.
Yeah, but
I've recorded some,
the record company makes all the money. You guys don't get any of the money though.
well, um, I mean, you know, most of our albums were with uh In the Red Records, Sympathy for the Record Industry, PCP Records. Those are all really legit, credible.
Oh,
The
okay.
people that run those are not out to screw anybody. And I think, you know, at the time I wasn't even thinking about it, but now I try and piece it back together. Um, you know, they aren't, we do as well with them as you could with anybody, probably better. You know, they're very generous because they really care about those bands. They're the ones that brought us and other bands like us to the attention of anybody that would give us any money. You know, somebody like MCA Records, you're never going to make that money back that they spent taking you out to lunch or sending you on a shitty tour, you know, in order to make any money off of those. It's not going to happen really. So you just have to kind of know what game you're playing with who. And I'm proud of all the work, you know, all that's good.
Yeah, I used to go to. I went to a couple shows with Long Gone John, like back in the '80s,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah,
yeah,
I love him.
I think we saw, or I would see him at a show like the Cramps or the Lords of the New Church or something, and he would be there.
Yeah.
I knew him. I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know he did this whole record label. I knew he was like. I knew he
Yeah.
did some kind of flea market stuff, And he was like the first person I met that had, we go to his house and he had like 10,000 records. And I go, wow, that's good. I thought I had like 300 records. I thought I had a big record collection. This
Yeah, yeah.
guy has everything.
Yeah, but those guys are so important. Those people are so important, because they're not doing it for any big payoff. They just really love music. Like Larry Hardy at In the Red. I mean, there's something so pure and beautiful about that. I can't, I don't know them intimately, but anything I've ever done with them, and still to this day, they've been supportive of the book. They've been positive. Like they're not dicks. It says a lot in the record industry. They're really not dicks.
So here's the book again. Everyone should buy a copy and buy a couple copies. And
Yeah, people are giving them to their friends. They're getting one for themselves. Sometimes they're getting an audio version for themselves. That comes with original music. That comes with Speedball Baby music, Exene Cervenka, and then I'm reading it, and I'm leaving it all on stage. And then they're buying one for their friends.
And then you have these other books too, the Laws of the Bandit Queen and
Yeah.
Marble Love. That you got the photography books. You've been doing that for a while. You can go to, you have a website, alliesmith.com, right?
Yep. ALISMITH
And
dot com.
people can find out how to buy the books there. And this is definitely like one of my favorite books of the year so far. I'll put it on
Oh, yay.
my top 20 for 2024. Didn't and
God, you read a lot, don't you?
well, yeah, well, I was an English major, and yeah, I still read like about 100 books a year. Still, I don't know. Is
Okay.
that a lot? Is that I'm kind of a nerd?
Good for you.
But yeah, well, yeah. And my book's coming out in May. Like the collected poems. Okay, so yeah,
Ooh.
thanks for talking to me. And like I really love the book. I got to read because the interview was a little delayed. I got to read it a second time.
Oh, wow.
I read it.
Hey, that's good.
Yeah, I read it like
So,
yeah, and sometimes that's good for me because like sometimes I'm just reading, you know, to I'm kind of scanning it the first time and then I actually
yeah.
the second time's kind of a read, but I mean
So
it's
that means it's two of your top 20 books.
yeah, it's definitely it's one and two right now, and then the list is gonna change. I don't know what else did I read that was good this year. I don't know. I think I've read a lot of older books, but
Yeah.
what is there any books or music that you like that you could recommend since we have
Well, I'm always devouring true stories. So what's up here? Oh, this one I love. This is an old book, but I love this book. It's called The Mole People.
oh yeah, look for me.
Um, Life in the Tunnels Beneath New York City by Jennifer Toff. So it's like 30 years old, but she went and lived with the people. When I was little in New York, when I was probably like 8 or something, I remember you'd go through on the subway, you'd go through these dark tunnels, and sometimes you'd slow down around one of the abandoned stations, And I just remember one time we were slowing down, and there were dim lights on in the abandoned station, and somebody just came out of the dark and went and like hit the window really hard and knew he'd flipped everybody out, but I was just why ping. So the idea that there's this whole underground community, which there is, it's enormous in New York, I always found compelling. So that's what The Mole People is about, and I really love that. This one's called, oh well, we've got The Diving Bell and the Butterfly,
Oh
but
yeah, I like
also
that. I like that book.
yeah, Kid Congo's memoir,
I read that.
fantastic. Yeah, love that one. He's so funny and smart. Um, I read Debbie Harry's latest one.
Not that one.
I just read this graphic
Oh,
novel because I was like, I don't really understand what the hell is going on. And
yeah.
this was a good one, just sort of laid it out there and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But I mostly read memoirs, biographies. I mostly like
Yeah,
that.
I read.
Billy Childish is one right now. I'm
Yeah,
doing Billy Childish.
I'm reading mostly like nonfiction these days. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for talking to me. Let me
Well,
stop this here.
thank you, Alexander. Thank you.
Peace and across the pond. Let's see.